Alrighty, beautiful weather out today. It's actually above freezing right now in January in Alaska, which is a pretty rare occasion. So weather's kind of nice down here in the shop for getting some work done on the old M-38. So I started putting the rear axle together, of course, figuring out the shim packs that I need for these axle shafts. So I needed a new wheel bearing on that side. I'm being a cheap bastard and I'm not putting a new wheel bearing on the other side. Probably not recommended, but that's what I'm doing. And then, of course, figuring out the shim packs. So this outermost plate is your bearing retainer, but all these guys in here are shims so that you can set the end plate on the axle shaft. And don't do what I did. When I came down here a couple days ago and started this process, I put this side in and said, oh man, there's way too much end play on that and there's no shims in it. And you need both axle shafts in the rear end to set the end play. There's a block in the differential that both axle shafts bump into, and that block can move a little bit. So if you don't have both axle shafts in the differential, then you'll just have too much end play. I did that exact same thing when I was putting the Dana 27 in the Scout together, and clearly I didn't remember my lesson, so I had to learn it again. But yeah, and you want to set these the specs 4 to 6 thousandths, and that kind of sounds like 4 to 6 thousandths. Yeah, I'm just kidding. We got the old dial indicator out. I already own this thing, so I might as well use it. So if we push it in, you can see we're at about -1, and that's at like 3.5. So yeah, when she gets to working with the grease and everything, that's 4 thousandths there. By the time that bearing gets broken in, it'll probably be just a little bit looser, and we'll probably be right at 6 thousandths. So she's right in spec right there. So we can go ahead and take the two. I just put 2 bolts in to retain this here. Of course, when you put this together, I went on either side of the axle here and smacked each axle shaft with the dead blow just to make sure we had it all the way out. That's one thing. If you pound the bearing race in too far, you'll get a fake tighter reading than it would be. So yeah, I went back and forth, tapped either axle shaft so we got it nice. And you want to push the bearing race out far enough that you get the correct reading, like I did. So we have 4 to 6 thousandths on the axle shafts. Now we can go ahead and put the backing plate on with the gaskets and the seal. And I have the seal, or there's a little oil slinger plate. I'll show it to you in a second. That needs to go in there as well. So we'll get this blown apart and then put back together. Alrighty, so based upon a video that Kaiser Willys put out, Kaiser Willys is pretty much kind of the forefront for Jeep parts, so I trust what they have to say about rebuilding these axles. They say, so shims, and then your bearing retainer, and then the backing plate. Depending on where you look, some folks put the bearing retainer on the other side of the backing plate, which essentially uses the backing plate as a shim as well. I don't know about that. Like I said, Kaiser Willys put out a video. I'm going to trust what they said. This axle, when I took it apart, actually had the bearing retainer on the other side of the backing plate. So that's a little wonky. I don't particularly trust it. But like I said, based on what they did, shims, bearing retainer, and then we're going to have, let's not set those on the dirty floor. Then the backing plate is going to go on. Then this gasket. And then this is your seal here. So the seal is going to go on. And then this guy is kind of, I want to call it an oil slinger, but it's not an oil slinger. It's a kind of a grease retainer that goes on, and that basically shields the brake assembly from having any of the excess grease that comes out from shooting everywhere in the backing plate. And you can see we have an extra hole where a bolt does not go. And basically, if enough builds up in there or water or something gets in there, it'll drain out of this little chute here. So yeah, that's going to be the process, and then I'll torque all that down. I need to double check the torque specs. I'll correct it if I'm wrong, but I think it's 20 to 25 foot-pounds, and then this will all be nice and assembled. Alrighty, I did lie to you guys. 25 to 30 foot-pounds for those bolts, so double check that, and then yeah, pretty much you're done. Ready for the drum assembly here. My drum assembly is a little dirty. I'm going to take it and clean it up. I've already got the other one up getting cleaned. And so that's about all for this side. Now I just need to do the other side, of course, install the drums, and our rear axle is reassembled. And once the drums are on it, I can put wheels on this thing, if I had wheels to put on it. So yeah, that's that for rear axle assembly for right now. I will update you guys when we get the drums on here and everything. And then up next is going to be the front axle. I was up here the other day. Oop, too much junk on the floor. I was up here the other day and I yoinked the front drums off, and you can see it looks pretty decent in here actually. New shoes, which I knew. The new shoes is why I didn't buy new shoes for the front of this thing. These wheel cylinders I'm going to need to rebuild. I should have rebuild kits up on the shelf, I think, from Eureka. So yeah, but I'm going to pull the backing plates off the front here, as a matter of fact, because I'm going to put new knuckle bearings in this thing and new knuckle seals. This front axle is way too tight. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. If somebody just pulled shims out of these kingpin caps or what, or if there are any shims in there. Usually when you get an old rig like this, there's too much up and down play in the knuckles from the bearings being worn out from, 60, 70 years worth of wear. But on this one, I think somebody was, sort of trying to improperly rebuild it, and they pulled all the shims out to tighten it up. And of course, that's an issue because I suspect the kingpin bearings and races are completely worn out. They usually wear really bad grooves in the races. So yeah, there's whole bunch of new parts on the way for the front end here, so we're waiting on that. And I'm waiting on transmission, transfer case, and engine mounts, which are all on the way. And then once I get the transmission and transfer case together, I can set them in here, and then we'll be ready to disassemble my workbench here, which has a very important component for this whole project in it. But for right now, I'm going to keep whittling away at this thing. I just come up here and couple hours at a time I work on things. I actually tightened down the front axle. I finally tightened down the U-bolts on that. I need to get the tie rods out of here and get the bell crank. I got a bell crank rebuild kit for this thing. So we've got, this is the M-38 assembly from when I took the frame apart. So I'm going to use this bell crank once I get to it, and then I'll probably not be lazy, and I'll probably buy new tie rod ends. That would probably be a good idea. I would like it to steer somewhat decently, but like I said, I'm just going to keep whittling away at this thing for the time being. I'll keep you guys updated as the progress continues. Alrighty, wrenching away here on the front. Got the backing plate, spindle, and axle shaft out of here. You can see this thing had some pretty ancient grease in the knuckle there. I usually put a John Deere cornhead grease in these knuckles because John Deere cornhead grease is a lot thinner and better for these. It doesn't leak out, but it's thinner, which is exactly the middle ground you want, especially up here in the Wild Frontier. So I'll have to clean all this old grease out of here, and we'll repack it. But you can see just, I mean, how stiff this thing is. Prime sign that somebody took all the shims out of the bearings here so that this thing wouldn't have so much up and down play. But of course, what it did is it jammed the bearings into the races, and now it's all stuck. So yeah, I'll pull the knuckle seals off of this. We'll pull it out of here, and I'll show you guys just how bad these bearings are going to look, because they're not going to be good looking. Alrighty, folks, we're back down in the shop, and as you might be able to tell by the pile of boxes and the piles of tools and every other thing, I've just been obviously throwing parts and tools at this thing for a little while. Just been piddling away at tiny little projects here and there, just slowly getting this frame somewhere to where, you know, it starts to look like a Jeep again. But we're getting there. Slowly but surely, every few days, another little part gets thrown at this thing. We're getting there. So let me catch you guys up on the frame real quick, and then I'll show you what we got over here, and I'll get you guys all caught up real quick. So I believe since we last checked in, I got drums on the rear end. So rear end's all set. I had to scrounge around in the parts pile, and I just went ahead and found drums that had good wheel studs on them, because of course these are swaged wheel studs. So if you have a bunged up wheel stud or something, you can't just knock it out and replace it like you would most other things. you would need a swage cutter to cut that swage out of there. So right there where my pinky is, that area on the stud itself is sort of pressed out. It's kind of mushroomed out from the factory to keep that stud in there. So if you go in here and, chuck this up in a shop press or something, you'll absolutely annihilate this wheel flange here, which is not a good time. So I would either have needed a swage cutter, which they do make and sell, or I would have had to have done what I did, which is I just went out to the old parts pile and found good drums with good studs on them so that I could just, sidestep the whole issue of finding or cutting the swages and replacing the studs. In the future, that might change, but for right now, we've got the rear end all buttoned up, more or less, sort of. Everything is sort of getting there, but it's not progressing very fast. But the axles are bolted in for good with these new U-bolts that were on the M-38 when I got it, and we got the new leaf springs from Alaska Spring. These were on the M-38 when I got it. These are some of those new parts that I really wanted to use. I did get a whole brake line kit. I actually found a really good deal on the full brake line kit. Some parts of it are over here on my really nice workbench here. So we've got all the brand new brake lines. I got new shock absorbers and everything. Just slowly, getting things put on here. I forgot if I mentioned that I got this cross member in here. I do need to actually pull the skid plate back off so I can put the engine mounts back on here, because of course, hiding in this box, we have transmission and engine mounts. I went ahead and ordered all new mounts, so I don't even have to worry about the rotten old rubber holding up on this thing. More or less, I'm trying to have a full mechanical restoration. The body's not going to look real pretty when I'm done, but little things like that I don't ever want to have to think about, so we just went ahead and got new rubber. I kind of rebuilt the pedal assembly here, so I pulled everything apart, cleaned it all up. Obviously, I painted the whole assembly and everything, and then greased and lubed everything up. So just between cleaning everything, it turned out pretty nice. I am now just realizing that I'm going to need to pull this one back off because it hits the spring bushing there. So that's real cool, but that's a problem for later. So the pedal assembly is all put together there. Moving on to the front end, there's those new shock absorbers. They are not bolted on all the way yet, but they do look really nice. I believe I was telling you guys about this on my last update. So brand new knuckle seals, new knuckle kingpin bearings, top and bottom on both sides. These hoses were brand new whenever somebody was working on my M-38 last. This setup is not the factory setup for the brakes. The original setup had like a weird bracket here, kind of a shield doohickey thing up here, and then the S brake line went down in there. Actually, I'll just show you guys. So more or less, this is the original setup. So you have this like S brake line that goes up to this doohickey here, and then your rubber line's there. So the rubber line articulates with the wheel turns, and then you have that hard line going into the wheel cylinder. But as you can see, the wheel cylinder comes straight out, and on those wheel cylinders on the M-38 over there, they actually come out at an angle. So that front system setup actually needs to have the rubber hoses the way they are. So as you can see here, I need to have these rubber hoses this way, and I'd go for the stock setup, but those were brand new wheel cylinders a few years ago, whenever somebody was last messing around with this project, of course before I got it. If that's the date, then somebody was fiddling with this in 2004, which is a lot longer ago than I would have thought. I'll bet that is the date. 3 of 04, March of 2004. So 21 years ago, somebody was messing with this, but those wheel cylinders actually look really nice. The brake shoes in here were brand new, so I'm not going to touch any of that. And we'll just go with this braking system for now. And maybe in the future, I'll want to change it to that other setup. I do like the other setup more, but like I said, brand new parts are brand new parts. And I'm going to go ahead and use them because, well, money saved is better than money not saved. Another little side project that I took on in the meantime is I rebuilt the bell crank here. So this turned out pretty good. Oh, that grease is nice and stiff because it's cold in here. You guys can't, well, you might have been able to tell by that axle still had snow on it in the back of the shop, but it is cold in here. So, you know, grease is stiff and everything, but I ordered a rebuild kit for this bell crank. The bell crank's in pretty all right condition. There is some wear there, but it'll work fine. This is the original M-38 bell crank, and then the full rebuild kit actually came with this new pin, new bolt, and then new bearings to go in the bell crank there. So that was a real nice setup. Got that guy all tucked in there. So the steering's almost there. I've got tie rod ends on the way to get all that put in here. So we have almost a complete steering system. Like I said, everything is kind of sort of put together, but you know, it's a slow process. But the big thing that I wanted here, and right now, is I've got all 4 drums on this thing, so I can put wheels on it now, and it can roll. And what I want to do here in the next week or so is get wheels on this thing and sort of maneuver it out of here so I can clean my giant mess of soiled rags and nuts and bolts and wrenches and sockets and sawzalls and floor jacks and brake clean and old hardware bags and every other thing. I want to clean everything up and then put the frame back so I can start afresh here pretty quick. So yeah. Over here we've got the wheels that I'm going to throw on this thing, and I'll probably use these wheels for a little while even though they're not what I wanted. These are actually off of the Skonko, if anybody knows what that is. The Skonko is a early Bronco body sitting on a Scout frame. It's a 67 Scout 800 frame, and the Bronco body is absolutely mangled. But I put it on there so it would roll and we could kind of move it around the yard. And it kind of looks pretty neat. I mean, look at this thing. So as you guys might be able to tell, I went ahead and took the old wheels that were on my M-38, which are M151 Mutt wheels, and I put them on the Bronco up there. I couldn't get the one on because the body's absolutely mangled and there's kind of a fender in the way of it, but it kind of looks kind of neat because those are 750/16 bias plies. They're a little bit bigger and they do really look good on that that Bronco Skonko absolute combobulation thing. But I grabbed these wheels because these will fit my Jeep a little better. Mutt wheels have more back spacing to my understanding, and so the way my Jeep was sitting, there was probably like that much space between the inside of the tire and the frame rail on the M38, which obviously isn't a lot of turning radius, and if you start articulating the rear axle, it would rub the tub, which wasn't an issue when it wasn't running, but it should be running in the future, hopefully, theoretically. So I went ahead and grabbed these. These are 15-inch wheels, not the 16s that I wanted. So, you know, they're wrong, but they're better. So, you know, we're getting there slowly with just tiny little baby steps. So I'm going to clean up here a little bit, get those wheels thrown on here. I do have lug nuts for this thing somewhere, and then I'll get this out of here and we'll get the wheels on it. And I don't know, maybe we'll have a quick look at this thing when I've got it sort of over there in the open where we can walk around it a little bit better. But it's a whole process. As an absolute side note though, this project is gathering me quite a number of Rock Auto magnets. So, you know, got to take it where you can get it. Boy, this level of success really calls for a victory beer. Before you guys say anything about it, you know, it was a free beer, so I'm not going to complain about it. Alrighty, well there she is. Not going to lie, I sat here for a couple of minutes just looking at this thing because, boy, does that look nice. That's quite a bit of work right there just to get to here. I even made new trash and left it in the way. Throw it on the pile of dirt and snow there. Goodness me, does this thing ever look nice. It's kind of a shame that I didn't have the time to like clean up the tires because that kind of brings down the property values. But boy, all this hard work is sure looking nice. I even sat here for a couple minutes. I threw on the rear rubber line here, and then I was test fitting this hard brake line. This hard brake line, they bent it over to fit it in the box to ship it, which I didn't mind. If it makes shipping cheaper, I'm not going to complain, but that does mean I had to recontort it and get it sort of in there. I still need to flatten it out some and get it fit to the frame rail better, but it is the right line and it does go to where it should go. Another thing, my master cylinder just arrived today, which is awesome. So we have a master cylinder. I have all of the hard lines that I need. Like you guys probably already seen, the rear lines are on there. They need the hose clamps to hold these to the axle tube yet. And then I need to put the whole front back together. But we're that close to working brakes. One thing that I didn't mention that really helps to push this thing around the shop is you do kind of need the tie rods and drag link and all that to, steer the tires together. So I grabbed these old tie rods here and threw them on and just threw old lug nuts on there to sort of just slap it together for the time being. This needs all new tie rod ends on it. So I'm going to need to do that. And then while I'm at that, I'm going to need to clean, well, I don't need to, but I'm going to clean these up and paint them, so they don't look so crummy up against those leaf springs that I also didn't paint, but it's all stuff for another day. It's all stuff for another day. We're just working away at it one little piece at a time, but this sure is nice looking now. Like making some progress. Here she is sitting on wheels. We have the suspension is more or less almost ironed out. The tires are on there. The brakes are that close. Everything is that close to being almost halfway done. So, little by little, we're getting there. I'm going to sit here and stare at this thing for a little while longer. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's little snippets of things, but nothing's really worth talking that much about. It's just a ton of trips down to the hardware store, ordering parts. 90% of the time here is just waiting on USPS and UPS and all those other shipping companies to hurry up and get my parts here so that I can, not install them for like 2 weeks. But yeah, this whole process is just a lot of sitting and waiting and hoping and then kind of trying not to half-ass everything you do, because boy, do I ever just try and, half-ass everything that I do. And I'm sort of trying to not do that on this project. So we're getting there, just little by little, we're getting there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the nonsense here. If you didn't, stick around. We'll be doing engine and transmission and all that nonsense. And then eventually there will be a body involved and probably some wiring and all that other stuff to make a vehicle run and drive. So I don't know. If you guys enjoyed it, I hope you did. If you didn't, oh well. But thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.